Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Not Your Normal Nerdcast. Today, we are joined by my ever wonderful co host, Mac, and
Hello.
a very special guest, Mr. Johnson of the Arcology Podcast. Mr. Johnson, how about you tell everybody what you're famous for and what you do?
Hello, well, thanks for having me on. I suppose I'm most known for the Arcology podcast, which is a podcast about all things Shadowrun. We have episodes talking about Shadowrun, 5th edition, 6th edition, Anarchy, as well as very long running actual play campaigns. So if you're stuck with something needing something to entertain you for a long time, there are many, many, many hours of Shadowrun actual play posted there. Also, I make the Legends of Earthdawn actual play podcast, which is an Earthdawn podcast. That's a lot of fun, and I'm a founding member of the Shadowcasters Network and do tabletop RPG streams on there. And I also GM and or play in the Shadowrun Origins podcast. So I guess I've been involved in one project or another with each of you.
Yeah.
Mac most recently with Rural Punk and yeah, James, of course, you're on Shadowrun Origins as Jazz, who I got to fry pretty good recently. Spoiler alert, a little bit late there, but
Yeah, no, it was
he
it
gets set
was
on fire. It
a,
was
a
fun.
lot of fun. Yeah, a whole lot of fun for our boy Jazz. So we brought Cliff on today to kind of talk a little bit about GMing and trying to handle things in a good, healthy, respectful way whenever it comes to mostly like romantic subplots, sometimes between characters and NPCs, the do's, the don'ts, the ups, the bads, all of that different type of stuff. Because I know personally, I have been in a fair amount of games where those were not handled well. So, as far as handling any kind of romance or anything like that in games, what is kind of some of the hard and fast rules that you live by, Cliff?
Well, I haven't always done this because it's been a more recent development in the tabletop gaming world, but I would definitely say it's important to use safety and consent tools to know what the comfort levels are of your other players and what they're looking to get out of the game. So I guess between consent and safety tools and a good session zero, you can get a feel for, I guess, what kind of romance is acceptable and or wanted as an element of the story in the role playing game. So I think that's gonna be my rule number one for this topic
That's
going
kind of a
forward.
good general rule number one for like any topic, really. Um, Communicating with your players is always, like top priority.
Yeah, and also kind of making sure that any kind of boundaries that may or may not need to be set are known up front. So the last
Mm.
thing that you want to do is bring something up that somebody definitely does not want to do.
Yeah, I think the free PDF provided by Monty Cook Games with a checklist of a number of different things, I think that covers the romance issues fairly well because it breaks down, whether or not you're up for romance between player characters or just between NPCs, whether you want stuff to get explicit or fade to black, and makes a separate bracket between romance and sex, which is a whole other
Hmm.
dimension to it. But
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
think you want to have in your role playing game, you want to have a story that feels real and characters that feel real and lived in, and to one degree or another, in some way, that's I mean, a romance is something that's going to be involved in your characters' lives. So I think it's a good idea to find ways to explore that in a way that's healthy for everybody, but also make sure that you understand people's boundaries and what they're there for.
Hmm.
yeah. I know that there's been a lot of negative ways. I mean, for instance, the group that I'm in at home, we have made. I say we. Whenever I joined up with said group, there was kind of an unspoken rule of we don't really get into romantic subplots or any kind of sexual plots, especially because apparently there was a situation in the past where I guess the term that was used was a masturbatory GM decided to completely over explain a sex scene.
Great.
Yeah.
I've had one of those. It didn't quite get to that point, but like I was straight up told by a GM that yes, it was a guy. I am a lesbian. I played a lesbian character because I always fucking do. That it, so like he straight up told me that he wanted to like play out a sex scene with my character and like an NPC that I was trying to romance, and I was like, no, that's weird. Also, we played in like a public place, which was even more uncomfortable. Like, no, I'm not gonna sit in the middle of a game store and like
This is
do that
uncomfortable. Like,
with
this
you.
makes me uncomfortable just thinking about it.
Oh yeah, no. Imagine how I felt.
Yeah, I think in general you can figure that the default setting for any sexual content is on the not explicit side with
Hmm.
anyone, unless maybe you've found some way to have a deep conversation about it and you definitely know otherwise. I mean, that's the safe way to go.
Hmm.
Is to assume that that's not something to be described in the gaming table, because I mean, people, you're representing and inhabiting characters and they're interacting with one another, whether it's the individual player characters or the GM. There's no way that doesn't get weird. I mean, unless
Yeah,
that's
it's.
already part of the plan. I'm
Mhm.
definitely not shaming anyone if that's their thing. If you want to
Yeah.
involve role playing games in your uh, experiences, that's totally fine as
Mhm.
long as everyone's on board. But I mean, that's not your standard role playing game default.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's the kind of thing that you have to opt into. That can't just you
Just
can't just run with that because that's yeah, that's super weird.
yeah, and I know that every time that I've had any kind of romantic subplot or any kind of character that any of my characters is just like, man, like this is a person that I want to woo or whatever, or the atypical bard wants to sleep with everything. Um, every single time that that's happened, it's just like, okay, you take the person upstairs, and this is what everybody else is doing, and then it just those characters go off screen, everything like kind of the fade to black thing, and
Hmm.
that's how that's handled. It's way the hell off screen, and nobody talks about it until, of course, what usually happens in most of our games, where, as it turns out, the person that you wooed in romance, they were only after you because they knew that you had a coin purse, and when you were asleep, they robbed you. but but yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you, Megan. It's something that you really have to like opt into if that's something that you want to do, because
Hmm.
I think the safe assumption is don't think that everybody's going to be cool with it, because it's better to think everybody's not going to be cool with it and not have that awkward situation than
Yeah,
to
definitely.
like roll into it and then somebody all of a sudden has to like pull a hard stop on the entire
Hmm.
game and just feel like, look, man, we gotta like this is not kosher for me.
Well, I think on another level too, it's a good idea to understand and separate, or at least consider that they can be separated. Romance elements in a story and sexual elements in a story,
Hmm.
because you can tell an interesting romantic story without necessarily having to touch too much on the sexual elements. They're either not present or fade to black.
Hmm.
Or you may have people that are, say, they want to represent characters that are say, romantic, but they're asexual,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
exploring how people can love one another and have romantic interactions and relationships without necessarily figuring out how their plumbing fits together.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of a thing that I really feel like is overlooked. That whenever people think of
Absolutely.
romantic subplots in games and that sort of thing, that's really, like, say, that how their plumbing comes together is really the only thing that people think of. And that was something that now that I'm thinking of it, that's I really don't hear much of whenever you hear people talking about their games, as far as just, like, there's these two romantic characters, and instead of them being two sexually romantic characters, they're just two people who are just in love and just kind of doing things together, which I think is kind of it's an interesting element that I think would be something that would be fun to explore, assuming everybody's cool with it.
Hmm.
But then
No,
again, 90% of my characters are generally unlovable assholes. So
I've I've played a lot of role playing games with my spouse, and most of the time I tend to be the GM. So there's that. But I guess sometimes when we're both players, we ended up having a romantic relationship crop up between the characters, and sometimes we choose not to explore that.
mhm.
Hmm.
So that can be a fun thing if you're playing with people that you are, out of game personally romantically involved with. It could be fun to play with that in the context of a role playing game, though it's important to consider everyone else's fun outside of the romantic aspect as well. So,
Yeah. Well, and there was a character that I played, that in general was probably, I don't want to say the creepiest, but definitely the most. He was a great old one warlock. He was a tiefling, and
Ah.
Chelsea and I were playing in a game together, and she created a tiefling fiend patron, and just on a
Ooh.
whim, because most of the time, whenever Chelsea and I play different characters, we typically tend to butt heads. And the main reason why I used to do that, and like why it just kind of always worked that way, is because the last thing that I want to do is bring other people into, like, me and my wife being super lovey-dovey in a game, because I've had that happen to me before, and it's just not a situation I like being in. So, and I probably do this subconsciously, but like most of the time, I'm just like, all right, look, our characters are gonna get along, but like my character's just gonna like mercilessly like fuck with your character, just so you know. And but this time around, we were like, because my character was very very much a knowledge is the only thing that is important to him, and that's how he got his patron, was because his pursuit of knowledge became too all consuming.
Mm.
And her character, they were romantically involved, but they didn't really seem like it. They were just like two people who just seemed like really 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 good friends,
Mm.
and there was no like the romantic tension. There was never any kind of like sexual anything, and a lot of that had to do with trying to be respectful to the other players at the table, because like I said, the last thing I want to do is just like be super lovey with my wife, and then everybody's like, guys, can you not? Like we're trying to play a game here. If you guys want to be all cute and shit, do it later.
Mm. I also play a lot of role playing games with my partner, and my experience has kind of been like, I don't want to say the opposite of that, but like that is a setting that we can't turn off. And I think that part of it is just like having to deal with the whole like, I mean, other people being like, "Oh, can you tone it down?" When we're doing like totally normal, like not uncomfortable romantic things. Um that like, I mean, like, I don't know how to phrase this in a way that like doesn't sound weird, but like, straight people are able to get away with like a lot more like romantic displays than like gay couples are generally. Um
And that stems back to the whole idea of just like, why are you throwing it in my face, bro?
yeah,
It's like, dude, like we've literally been throwing straightness in their face for let's see, how many hundreds of years?
so many.
Yes.
Um but yeah, I think that part of part of our like I don't know if it's just I don't know if it's actually inability or if it's just like straight up refusal to tone it down in front of other people. I think it stems from that, but we like my partner and I, we love each other. And we show that like pretty much anywhere we are. And again, like that ends up just like coming out
Just kind of
in
manifesting
our
itself.
yeah, in the characters that we play in games together. Um, Even if we don't necessarily like tend to get our intend to get our characters together, it ends up happening anyway. Um, so yeah. I don't know where I was going with that, but like that's just been like a common theme.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from just the like with my concept to just be like, I don't want people to just be like, can you tone it down? I think a lot of that
Mm,
comes from the fact of that I'm just really really anxious about being, I guess, that couple, if that makes sense, because 100%
oh yeah, no, I
at
understand.
home we totally are. Like we're
Mm.
definitely those like ones who like across the room it's just like, hey, love you, stupid shit like that, like all the time. But then the second that people come over, we just immediately are just like two boxers go into their corners and like we just fuck with each other mercilessly. And but I think that's where a lot of that part comes from with me
Mm,
at least.
yeah.
So, Cliff, you said that, and of course Chelsea in the chat. Yep, that's exactly how we are. Um, but Cliff, you said that you've played, or did you say you have played in a couple of games with your spouse?
Yeah, quite a few actually. I mean, over the years.
So has that been like have you played as a couple, or like have you played as like two separate beings who weren't together or anything? And if you did like as a romantic couple or anything like that, what were some of the things that you did as a player to like, I don't want to say like not make it weird, but that's really the only way I can think to describe what I'm trying to ask.
Hmm. I think in most cases I think more often than not we've played characters that have not been romantically involved. We just play our characters as they are. But yeah, I think in a couple cases it's been sort of an organic evolution of the characters that they sort of become romantically involved. Probably because we as players are into each other and decide to go that way. But a lot of the time we don't actually bring that up with our characters though. So I think there was a really fun campaign that we played where Courtney's character was a never mind. I'm mixing some of them up. It's been a long time since these old
Mm.
third edition D&D campaigns. Yeah, there was no romance in that one. Never mind. Sorry, that
Oh
was a
no, no,
useless
you're good.
tangent.
It's okay.
That train didn't go anywhere.
Mm.
That's all right. There are definitely a lot of situations on this show where we just um start a sentence, like you say, start a train rolling down a track, and then like halfway through, me especially, I'll just realize, oh shit, where was this supposed to go? Where was this supposed to stop?
I
Um,
think more recently it's I guess it's been more with me GMing and my partner Courtney or Vox. Her character Kit was romantically involved with another one of the player characters, the kid. Um,
Mm.
which is
and that
honestly
that
one of
was a
the
long running storylines. So
that was one of the best ways that I've ever seen that handled, because like that is one of the reasons why like part of the reason why I was like super glad that you agreed to do this is because hearing that romance between those two characters, it just everything felt really natural, and it really felt like it just kind of flowed together really well. So I want to compliment you on how you did it, because it was fucking great. And like that was like 100% my Shadowrun power couple for the longest time.
yeah, it just, I guess, sort of seemed to organically happen in the story for the characters, and shortly after it kind of started a little bit like out of character. They both contacted me and were like, "Hey, are you cool with this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. It's cool. I don't care."
Mhm.
Like, I think maybe that's a good point on the safety and consent side of things. Is maybe also knowing people well enough to understand the subtext of when they say it's cool, because I was
Yeah, no, definitely.
I think both Ken and Courtney were like a little bit taken aback and "Are you sure?" with just how completely nonchalant and fine I was with it. In my case, I'm perfectly comfortable with my relationship. It's well established. I feel
Mhm.
secure
Mm-hmm.
and loved and all that stuff, and it's fine. I have no worries about this person trying to woo my spouse away from me and them running off together. But that's an actual real possibility for other people in other situations. So,
Mhm.
and they might not feel comfortable to state their potential worries outright. So so yeah, when you get into these interactions with people, it's whether or not it's okay is such a complicated question to answer.
Mhm.
And even like direct verbal consent from people involved might not actually be true consent, depending on the various dynamics involved. But in this case, it totally was. And I thought it was a fun avenue to explore. And yeah, those characters had a romantic relationship for a long time. And I don't want to be too spoilery, but they did break up, and there was some tension in there, and it was a lot of fun. The players were having a great time with it. They were not upset with each other at all, but the
Mhm.
characters were had their sort of thing they were in the outs for, and they did get back together, but then something tragic happened, and I don't want to go too much farther down that road, but that story's ongoing, and it's been a fun ongoing plot. Also, though, in the Arcology actual play, there have been a number of other romantic elements, like one of them being that Maverick plays himself up as something of a ladies' man who, well, does a lot of hitting on people, but just basically strikes out all the time because he's super cheesy about it.
Which is
It's
why
just,
we love Maverick.
it's really
Mhm.
more about the distinctive style than it is about getting chicks, I think. But
Mhm.
so we played through a couple times of him just various kind of lightly pursuing and or hitting on characters and them reacting to it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's been kind of a fine line to deal with because unwanted advances are not cool, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
And the sort of comedic womanizer character is like, I don't know, problematic.
yeah. It's a
um,
very very
Yeah.
fine line to walk if you're going to be playing a very ladies man esque character without it turning into just God. He's a misogynist piece of shit. Because like that was one of the things that I originally did with Wolf, who is my main Shadowrun character that I use. I wanted him to be like the smooth talking ladies man, and
Mhm.
like he has like girlfriends here, there, and everywhere else. And then like the more that I kind of thought about it, and the more that I like kind of played into that a little bit, I was like, man, I don't like doing this. Like I don't like being that guy who's like leading like two or three girls on and all that. So then I stopped putting as many dice into social skills as I did, and suddenly he went from like this womanizer basically to kind of the same thing with Maverick, where it's like, yeah, he thinks he's a ladies' man, but man, his batting average is like .002 at best. And then
Yeah.
the girlfriends that he has had have all ended terribly.
Oh no. Sorry, I'm just sitting here and listening to this, and I think it's so funny because I play well, like Sergeant Butch. What I did with her is I basically took like the ladies' man trope and I applied it to a woman. Um and like the difference with her is that she does not strike out. And yeah. Um I don't know. I have stories relating to that, but like I don't know um how to tell them on this stream in like an entertaining and not weird way. Um but
Entertaining
yeah,
and
no.
weird, I think, is what people are here for.
I mean,
That's
that's
fair.
fair.
Yeah. Um yeah, well like just as an example, like one of her fixers, she has a couple of like fixer contacts in the area that she runs in. And one of them is a one of them is like a dwarf decker who she initially met in a hookup. Um and they started talking and like finding out a little bit more about each other, and eventually Butch was like, "Oh shit, you're a fixer. I need work." Um so like how do I turn this around and make it professional and not you know, whatever it was that I was going to do.
Yeah,
Um
not just like a not just like a romantic thing.
yeah.
Which I mean that's kind of so in Shadowrun especially. I feel like that's where those lines can kind of be played out a little bit, where it's like you meet certain people
Mhm.
through whatever means, like you were saying, like you meet through like a hookup or something, and then suddenly you realize, oh, this person is in the same business as me, and like
Yeah.
now they can help me like advance in my work, and then trying to like navigate the pitfalls of going from a romantic-esque relationship to like a professional relationship, and then the ins and outs of how that would potentially work.
Mhm.
Like, that actually sounds like a really kind of fun like little story plot that I think I might put one of my characters through at some point if everybody's cool
Yeah.
with it.
I did not actually get to play that out, and I'm honestly really disappointed about that because it would have been a lot of fun um to like actually try to work through. Um Not to give too much of a spoiler for Pink Mohawk Edition, but Butch is kind of in the process of doing the opposite with another character. Um at
Going
this
from
point, going from
professional to
like
personal.
professional to romantic, yeah.
Nice.
Mm. So yeah, anyone who listens, you have that to look forward to. Once I actually start producing episodes again.
I don't want to hear it. You guys have put out like 2 episodes since we've put out the last one of ours, so is it 2? I
That's
I'm not
think
going
it's
fair.
to
2.
throw any stones in this glass house. So.
Exactly. I think if there's 2 people in this world that will understand like missing deadlines as far as putting out your episodes for your show, I really feel like it's this group because
I've got
Oh
to get
yeah.
back to some semblance of consistency.
Deadline?
It's totally
What's a
fallen off that
deadline?
wagon.
exactly.
Yeah.
Those were things I used to set for myself sometimes when I
Mhm.
pretended I had my shit together.
Back in the old days when we believed in those sorts of things and we were young and had so much hope.
Yeah. No, I've felt really bad recently because like I haven't been putting episodes out, and like to be fair, I've also been going through like major life changes and stuff. I just moved um a couple months ago, and then like whatever the fuck this is started happening.
Hmm.
Um I've been looking for jobs. Like I've had so many other things going on in my life, and I'm still like beating up on myself for not consistently releasing episodes. And like when I take a step back and I look at it, I'm like, wow, that's actually like kind of stupid. I shouldn't put this expectation on myself, but I do anyway. Um,
It's the bane of an artist.
but yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's kind of been what it's been like for me. Is that like I've been getting this off the ground and
Hmm.
trying to get all of this together, and Big Mac and I have been working so hard on trying to get everything done with Riot House that I actually talked to him the other day, and I was like, "Hey, do you know when the last time we did a DA episode was?" No.
Yeah.
God, how long has it been? I'm like, man, I don't even know. I feel
Mm.
so bad for the people who actually like support us and like want to hear new stuff.
Yeah.
But stuff is coming eventually.
Hmm.
I've got, as far as the various actual plays that I do, I've got generally recorded content to last for years of episodes yet.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's no shortage of that. I think in my case lately, I've just really been feeling this just kind of desire to turtle up and just be less vulnerable. I don't know. I don't want to lean into that yet. The emotional motivation behind it is such that it's I don't know. It's been hard to get over. I can get over it, but it takes more energy to do it. An extra spoon, so to speak.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, and that's kind of been that's kind of been the way it has been kind of for me too. Is just that like the only thing that I can concentrate on is just like one creative avenue at a time, because all of the bullshit that's going on, not only in like my
Hmm.
personal life, but now the world, which has completely gone to pot, which has then affected my personal life in a
Yeah.
drastic way. That's what we'll say.
Hmm.
Um, that's just like I say, I just don't have the spoons for it. I don't have the spoons to like try and do two creative things at once, and I've
Yeah.
forced myself into a schedule with Riot House that I have broadcast to all of the people who watch us. So I
Hmm.
have to stick to that schedule at the very least.
Yeah. Hmm.
I've got a fair bit of freelance work that's been, I've been working through, and in some cases been piling up, and it's been hard to focus on the creative stuff. Just yeah, 'cause the spoons aren't there. um,
Yeah.
I can put some work into it, but it feels like I have to do twice as much to get the same amount done. That
Mm.
said, I'm really happy with how Funny Freakout is turning out. I'm almost ready to release a playtest version of that.
Nice.
And I've had some really good ideas in the game design, I think. I hope. They seem
Hmm.
like good ideas to me, but they are my own ideas, so.
Well, at the same time, I can't remember who it was that I heard this from. It may have actually been a podcast where it just says like when you're creating something that you think seems fun, you're in a society or a group or whatever a culture, I guess is the proper word for it, that is into all the same stuff you are. So if you find it fun, there is a 80 to 90% chance that there is going to be a whole bunch of other people that find it fun as well. So
Hmm.
I think you're pretty solid in that as far as needing to worry about if it's gonna be fun, because I'm sure it's gonna be great. Am I the only one who doesn't know what freak out is?
I think Mac's a backer,
Yeah, I backed it.
So
so
could somebody explain what it
maybe
is?
I should say what it is, right? So
I'm gonna let you
Kickstarter,
explain what it is, Cliff, because you
yeah.
created it, and obviously you know more about it than I do.
So this year was the second year that Kickstarter did this event called Zine Quest, where they were encouraging people to make these, I guess, fairly easy to make RPG zines. Well, easy or difficult depending what people put into it, I suppose. But the idea being that you couldn't do really high production value. It was in the spirit of classic, punk rocker zines and classic RPG zines. So if your project met certain criteria, like you couldn't print it on like professional binding, the more lo-fi the better, more or less. They would they would promote your project in this zine quest um, promotion, and it was designed to draw attention to, I guess, indie RPG design and production, and it it went really well the first year they did it, and this year I wasn't going to, but somebody, I forget who, on Twitter just was saying, "Hey, if you're even thinking about at all doing a zine quest thing, you should just do it." I'm like, "Okay, fine, I'll just do it. I'll put out some sort of like small goal. I probably won't make it, but if I do, then I'll get some money to make an RPG idea." And then I tried to think of like what I had to work with, and I've had this back burner bouncing around in my head idea that would be fun to do, a sort of a Blades in the Dark style RPG, but instead of a bunch of thieves trying to pull off heists, um, you're basically the people on scare tactics, trying to pull off a funny prank to try to scare somebody with a fake horror scene. I haven't used the term scare tactics in any of this because I don't want to get sued. It's not a licensed game by them, right? But it's
Mm.
definitely inspired in many ways by that and other prank shows. So your characters in the role playing game are the actors that are trying to pull off a prank, like, oh, there's an alien abduction going on or something. And your mark, which is the only NPC played by the GM, actually, is someone you're trying to trick into thinking that they're going to get abducted by aliens or attacked by a werewolf or vampires or something, and then reveal it's a prank and have a good laugh. And hopefully, they also have a good time of it and not feel victimized.
Mhm.
So basically, it's a matter of balancing a number of different elements of the game. How suspicious the mark is, that this is not a real situation, that someone's trying to pull their leg, which you totally are, but you don't want them to realize too early.
Yeah.
Um, Bad feelings, which is a measure of like if you're actually doing things to harm them or hurt their feelings, that's not good. And if too much of that happens, it will end badly. And then there's weird, which is how unusual and weird you can make the situation, and fun, which is how much fun everyone's having. um, those are the two sort of measures that you want to bring up.
Yeah.
Those are the
Mhm.
good side of things, because the idea is you want the person that you're pulling a prank on to look back on this as a fun and exciting and good experience, not something
Traumatic
horrible that was
thing.
done to them
Yeah.
so that people would laugh at them. I'm not. This is not the game about bullying people by scaring
Yeah.
them. You want them to have a good time. So
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, so I'm gonna be honest. That sounds fucking awesome. Like
Yeah.
that
that was
sounds
probably a
really
longer
great.
explanation than you're looking for. Yeah, the short of it is, it's a party game style role playing game where uh, you're pulling off a horror comedy prank show.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I love that. That is great. Which
That sounds like a very good time.
the fact of this the first time that I'm hearing about it really upsets me.
But yeah, I had a Kickstarter and everything.
Yeah, I
It
just
actually
pulled it up.
funded to 100% in like the first 24 hours. I was
Oh,
super
Oh, that's
surprised.
nice.
awesome.
Um, I thought I was gonna like hit a bunch of stretch goals too, but it slowed down a lot after that. But still, it was
Ah.
amazing to like, hey, here's an idea that I have. Will you pay me to make it real? And people were like, yeah, totally.
Mhm.
Here, have some money, and I got paid money to do it, and yeah, I've got the playtest doc is almost ready to send out, and the actual like final version, which will be in PDF, it'll show up on itch.io for sale on there, and I'll do community copies as well for people who can't afford to buy it. And then people who back the Kickstarter at a certain level will be getting physical copies, which I will have printed out on my printer and stapled and sent out. I might choose to delay those based on the whole coronavirus thing, so people aren't worried about getting
Yeah.
coronavirus from paper I sent them. I'll have
Mhm.
to think about that. That's the first time this has occurred to me, actually. So, but
Mhm.
things are on track to have it go out on schedule, at least as far as the work I'm putting into it. So
Yeah, no,
you
that
can
is
expect a PDF that will be virus free.
Well, that is awesome. No, I actually kind of really want to play this now. Like looking at the Kickstarter and kind of reading up on and just hearing you talk about it. It sounds fucking dope. Like it sounds like a hell of a lot of fun.
I
Which
think it'll be a lot of fun. The rules are designed to be really simple, with the idea that like even I guess I want people who aren't in already into tabletop games to be able to look at this and grasp it and jump into playing a role playing game before they realize what's happening.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean that's kind of one of the things that I've noticed with certain people is whenever I talk about like Dungeons and Dragons, Shadowrun, and all that, they there's kind of that barrier of entry because people are just like, man, that's a lot of rules to have to learn, and that's a lot of stuff to have to remember and all that, and something super easy to learn and all that kind of can get them in the door and then get them hooked on it. So then they've got to go and buy an actual RP like a full
It's a
RPG
gateway
book.
RPG.
Exactly. Um, little does the plebeian gamers know that you don't have to know everything. I still don't know how to do Matrix stuff in Shadowrun or Magic, and I've been playing that game for years. I have a podcast about it.
I've
I
forgotten as
I
many
run a
rules as I've learned.
podcast about Magic and Shadowrun, and I still don't know how the fuck it works. I've played various types of casters in various editions of Shadowrun, and uh yeah, I still don't know how it works. So it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And but I mean, going into it, I did the exact same thing where it's just like, man, I'm
Hmm.
gonna have to learn all of this. I'm gonna have to know all of this. I'm gonna have to know everything about it so that I don't look like an idiot at the table. And then the first Shadowrun game that I just played like a mundane smuggler character, and suddenly, oh, well, well, I don't need to know any of this other stuff in order to play a character.
Yeah.
And then I ran a couple of games where I just like looked at the player. I'm like, hey, you know the Matrix rules, right? Yeah. Are you gonna play a Decker? Yeah. All right, cool. I'm gonna come to you for any kind of stuff that you need to do. Do me a favor,
Mhm.
don't cheat.
Yeah. No, that's exactly how I felt when I started like when I started getting interested in Shadowrun, I guess. Um I remember saying at some point, like, oh my god, I feel like I need a 4-year degree in, Shadowrun in order to actually run it. Um, and then I made friends with all the Shadowcasters, and I was like, you know what? No, I can totally do this. It's fine.
Turns out there's a whole bunch of people on the internet that have made it their goal to make it accessible.
Hmm. That's true.
Hopefully, the way it is presented in a way that is presented in a way that's entertaining. So,
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and in general, they're all decent people. Most of the people who have podcasts about Shadowrun are pretty okay people.
Hmm.
Most of the originals, like all of the originals, are really cool, but
are
some
you
some of
trying
those
to
new
bait me to
guys.
talk shit about Bobby? Because that's Damien's chick.
Most of them. I feel
No.
like you're throwing shade at somebody here.
I might be. I might be. There's a mirror over there that I've been continually looking at. So,
Oh no.
and I might be throwing a little bit of shade at my co-host, but I'm not. I'm not
Mhm.
going to admit to that because I would never do that. I'm a nice person,
Mhm.
which is generally the excuse most people use for not being a nice person is to tell people I'm a good person. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I think you're a nice person. I
That's
am friends with you for a reason.
but
I
only
don't know what that
one.
reason is, but no.
But only one reason.
Mhm.
Um,
Just one.
I think you're probably okay as far as I can tell. I'm kidding.
jury's still out on it. God, are we doing the pizza thing again? Is that what's happening in the chat right now?
So,
Oh no.
if I can, I guess maybe segue back towards the main topic a little bit. As far as drawing inspiration from players for things, I think that's That's for the most part where I've gone. Look as far as looking for direction in any romance angle. When I've been a GM, it's almost always been initiated in some way by the player, or I might have dangled a little something out with an NPC flirting with one of the characters, and then
Hmm.
let them choose whether or not to pursue that.
So that's a good question. Is that one way that if it's something that hasn't really been discussed, but then you notice that like a player is kind of leaning that direction, as like I'm going to use the stereotypical D&D trope of the bard hitting on the barmaid, or
The horny
something like
bard.
that. Yeah, the horny bard trying to seduce the dragon. Um, but it's
I
like,
gotta say, just flat out, I am so sick of the horny bard trope.
Oh
I'm a
yeah, no,
huge Bard
same.
fan, and it
Honestly.
pisses me off. Though I'm not personally pissed off
Mm.
at you or bitching about you
yeah.
being here or bringing it up
Yeah.
in this
Well, and
context. And I've also enjoyed it and laughed at it in some context as well. So that said,
Hmm.
I'm not yelling at everybody,
I've never
but I
experienced
am
it.
totally sick of the horny Bard trope.
Yeah, I've
Hmm.
never experienced it. I've never met anybody in my gaming that has been like, I'm gonna play the bard that's gonna seduce everything.
It's more of an internet meme than a thing that really
See,
happens.
that's kind of my thought because
I
A
mean,
web comic thing that happens.
I've heard it in an actual play. Um and like it was not done terribly. But it also got really fucking annoying after a
Well,
while.
okay, Meg,
I'm not going to name names as to
you're
like
the
which
one who
actual
said
play it was.
you're the one who said that you've actually played a character like with Sergeant Butch being someone who like goes about, getting
That's true,
things
but
done in that
she's not like
regard.
horny bard level of like
So, well, what's a
that.
couple of good practice tips then? As far as you've used with Sergeant Butch to not have it
yeah.
be, um,
Yeah.
too objectified, I guess, or maybe the point was it that your character objectifies. I don't know.
Uh
What do you have
she
to
does
say about
not.
it?
Um she definitely does not objectify anybody, but like, she's okay, so basically she's the kind of character who like is not above like seducing somebody to get her way or to get information out of them or whatever, but like uh she also knows that it is important to respect people's boundaries.
Mhm.
So even if it's like an NPC, if they're like, "Hey, back off," or "I'm not interested," or whatever, she'll be like, "Okay, great. That's fine. I will continue to ask you questions, but like I won't push this any further."
Pursue that
Uh
avenue of the
yeah.
question asking.
When I originally played her in the first group that I played in, which was not a great group, um, I like she was actually interested briefly in I I don't know, interested might be a strong word, but she was flirting with like another PC. Um and eventually the PC was like, "Oh yeah, well my fiance, da 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 da," and Butch is like, "Ah, fuck, okay," and just like never flirts with her again.
So
She's just
as
like, "All right, fine, she's taken, she's not interested, whatever. I'm just gonna move on."
Yeah,
so
so being perceptive of and responsive to boundaries as they're defined. I think
Hmm.
that's a good rule of
I
thumb.
think that makes all the difference. Um,
So
and I
don't
think
be
that
Peter Venkman from Ghostbusters, who is totally cringy to watch nowadays in the
yeah.
first movie.
Yeah, because that's what I was gonna say. Is like, I mean, what are some of the kind of best practices if you want to play that kind of character? Maybe not the horny bard who's gonna try to seduce the dragon per se, but like the to use the Shadowrun example, the face who just seduces their way into places and like is like the cool. I don't want to say like the femme fatale because I don't. What is the male version of that? like I don't want to say James Bond because I don't know that something about James Bond bugs me, but you get what I'm saying.
Mhm.
But like, how do you like what's best practices as a player to bring in a character like that without one making people uncomfortable, and two, if it's not something that has really been discussed, but it's very there's certain I'm trying to think of like there's certain cues that you're picking up on that people would be like okay with it, I guess.
Mhm.
Well, I think nowadays, now that the option has been put out there and thought of and invented and realized and put out into the world, also in many ways in free PDF format, I don't think you have any excuse to not have done some sort of a check in with people about stuff,
Mhm.
and safety tools in place and consent. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely having some kind of safety tool in place at, I mean, pretty much every table, in my opinion. Um,
Having a good session zero can help discover some things you might not
yeah.
realize should be important to discuss as well.
Mhm.
So, if
I am always a very big proponent of session zeros.
And like full
Even
session zeros, like
oh yeah.
decently long session zeros to where you actually
Mhm.
can get into the meat of your characters.
Yeah. Even if you're not, I mean, even if you are with a group where like you don't necessarily have to, or I want to be careful about how I say this because like even in groups with like people who I know really well, I still like to be able to go over safety tools just so that like we know where boundaries are for sure and everything. Um but yeah, I mean, even in groups where like you know each other really well and you've gamed together and you generally know where people's boundaries are, it's still really good to have a session zero just to establish like what you want out of the game. Um, because like there are a couple of games where we've done that and we've had like really good, really in-depth session zeros, and they're like the best, most enjoyable games that I have played.
Hmm.
Um, just because we've gotten to go into that like so in depth. Um, I feel like I spent so much time on that I kind of forgot like what the actual um initial subject was. And I feel very bad about that now.
Nah, that's how we run things around here.
I don't
There are no
remember
rules.
either, so
Mhm. Okay, great. It's not just me then.
But no, I think there was a player in a game recently that I played in that handled the idea that like we hadn't talked about any kind of romance or anything like that, but they had brought up the idea of, hey, I kind of want to develop my character a little bit, and I'm thinking about potentially trying to do like a date or something with one of the other PCs. Like, is everybody cool with that? And whenever this person brought it up to the other PCs, like, hey, is this something that you would be okay with? Is this something that you would be interested in role playing? And if there was any kind of like, I'm not really a big fan of, hey, no problem. All right, cool. No big deal. We do not have to do that in the least. And I thought that was a really good way to kind of approach that because sometimes
Mhm.
whenever you build a character to start with and then you start going down the life path of that character and then you start realizing certain things you didn't really plan for. I know that that happens with my characters a lot. Like
Mhm.
I'll plan like one of my favorite characters that I've ever had. I planned him to be like this tragic backstory half orc who's like he just wants to live a peaceful life, but he keeps getting into trouble and like having to fight and all that. And then it turned out like later on in the deal, I never told anybody that his family was dead. So it's like, fuck it. He's got two human parents that adopted him, and he loves them, and he sends them money home every other day or every other adventure.
Mhm.
And then like he has like this. Whenever he goes home, his dad still calls him champ, even though he's like a foot shorter than him and all that. And I never had planned for that character to be that way. But then
Mm.
eventually, as it went on, that's kind of how he developed.
That's
So
incredible.
yeah, so I think that like if you realize that that's kind of where you think that character's going to go, just check in. Just check in with people and just be like, hey, I'm thinking that maybe this character, he's got a lot of charisma, and they're going down this certain path. Is everybody cool with me kind of pursuing this a little bit, or should we kind of avoid it? And at least then it's kind of a mid-game
Mhm.
check-in type thing. Because
Yeah,
just
Yeah.
because you've checked in at the beginning doesn't mean you can't check in later.
Mhm.
it's also a good thing to remember about the safety tools and consent tools in general is they're not a static thing that sets things in stone and
Mhm.
then like you never have to worry about anything ever again.
Hmm.
People might not realize things they might not be comfortable with until they're in the situation, and that's where you need to be ready to adapt to that if it does come up, because it might. Despite all your best efforts to understand everyone's boundaries, you don't understand your own boundaries all the time.
Yeah.
um,
No,
and you don't
absolutely.
necessarily know that a boundary's there until it's been crossed.
Yeah, until suddenly it
You
just kind of hits you in the face almost. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's good to be sensitive to make sure to deal with those out of character considerations as the most important ones, and to even consider that, hey, even going back and retconning what happened in the game, even the way dice fell, that's it's more important to take care of your people than it is to worry about the game mechanic consistency. You can go back and change the story if you have to.
Yeah. Yeah, I do like what you had said a minute ago, where it's like you don't know what your boundary might be until all of a sudden something comes up that you weren't expecting. And that's been something that I've seen that's happened in a couple of games that I've had in the past. It's the example that I'm thinking of is like 5 or 6 years ago, where all of a sudden we were going through this situation, and it was a pre-written adventure, and I think the idea behind it was that they were trying to like make the characters think of another way to go about doing something, and they used the classic trope. I say classic trope, I don't know if it is, but like I've seen it in like movies and such, and like video games, where you go in with the thought process of one thing, and it turns out it's something completely different, and suddenly now you're this evil monster that's just attacked a village or something. And all of a sudden the player comes up there, and he was just like, guys, this is not sitting well with me at all. And I was like, okay, what's and we just, I mean, we full stopped. And I was like, what's going on? And he was like, I am not a fan of the idea that we just came in to this village that or this community, and everybody said that I'm trying to think of what like the hyena people are in D&D.
Oh,
Knowles?
Knowles.
Knowles, that's it.
Mhm.
Thank you. I'm glad you guys remembered it, because I couldn't for the life of me. But basically,
Yeah, Knowles are awesome.
there were
Mhm.
these gnolls who
I love
apparently
Knowles.
were killing villagers and all that. So this village hired the adventurers to go take them out. Well, lo and behold, sure enough, the adventurers go and do their thing, and then they come across, there's actually a gnoll village there with like women, children, and the whole 9 yards. And now they've just doomed this village to not having hunter gatherers anymore. And like the player was like, that's full stop. That is not okay with me. And we did. We stopped, and we were just like, okay,
Hmm.
no problem. It sounds to me like this was just a bad dream on the road before you got to the village. And boom, everybody wakes up having realized that they didn't do this horrible evil thing. And we
Hmm.
threw that adventure away. But I think that kind of harkens back to the idea of it's okay to check in even after
Mhm.
that initial thing. So,
Yeah, I think there's some sort of a tension or a fear that doing something along that lines would be cheating. It's not. It's not that kind of game.
yeah, well, and the beauty of like tabletop role playing games in general is like this is your world. It doesn't have to fit into the physics of the actual world. If you want to make it to where all of a sudden, like what we did was, oh, it was a dream. That's all it was. And now you're back on the road heading towards a village you heard was having a problem, and you wake up in a cold sweat because you've done something you're not proud of. But then, oh wait, it was
Ah,
just a dream.
the
Okay,
GM in
cool.
me is thinking, no, like, now that was just a dream, but it was a prophetic dream sent to you. And then you go to the village and you realize it's a more
Yeah.
nuanced situation. And then you negotiate with the gnolls. But no, never mind.
That's
Sorry, that's.
well, no, that's kind of what we did. Is like I was like, are you?
Yeah, no, I'm thinking the same thing. I'm like, oh, everybody in the whole party had the same like fucked up dream. Oh, if everybody had this dream, what does it mean?
Mhm.
You know.
and
So,
We
and that's
shouldn't
where they
just go
but
pursued it.
kill the
anyway.
gnolls. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and that's where they pursued it a little bit. And then whenever they got to the village, like I said, we threw the adventure out. I don't even
Mhm.
know where that path was even going anymore. But we threw the adventure out, and then like when we get to the village, they're like, "Oh, we've got these evil gnolls and blah 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 blah," and it ended up being that it's just like this dude was a racist, and he said that his family was killed, when in
Mm,
reality he didn't have a family, and he was just really good at lying. And yeah, and then they ended up like I think running that guy out of town and like
mm,
introducing the Knoll like chieftain or whatever, and then they became a very harmonious thing.
Yes, this consent stuff, it can come up with almost any aspect of the role playing game. But I do think in the romance element of things, it's a lot more likely to touch on people's boundaries or cross them.
Hmm.
So,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
um,
especially if like especially in a new group. Like if you're
Oh
not
yeah.
super familiar with the group, I mean there is a thousand different situations where it could be triggering, or it could bring up something in the past for somebody, and it's
or
just
people are
something.
trying to date each other in real life or
Yeah,
pursue another person in real life that may or may not be interested, and that comes through in the game. Yeah, it's there's so many ways for it to get awkward or cross boundaries.
that would make
Mm-hmm.
for a
So,
really awkward situation where it's like you really want to date somebody in your gaming group, so then like you start hitting on them in character. Whew, whew. That
Oh
just
boy.
that gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, that's weird.
Um,
That's really weird.
yeah,
it
that's
also sounds like it could be awesome if it's, consensual.
yeah. If it works
Like a
out,
Yeah.
really good love story maybe too, but
Mm-hmm.
probably not most of the time. But yeah, my the person that I married, Courtney or Fox as some people know her, she joined a gaming group that we were playing Shadowrun at the time, and I was dating
Mm.
someone, and she, didn't join a gaming group for a while after, but then when her friend told her that I was single, she rejoined again, specifically with the goal of, not just
Oh
playing
yeah.
Shadowrun, but also, getting a chance to get to know me better for a while after. But then,
hold on. There we go.
I remember hearing you guys tell that story on the arcology, and I was like, oh my god, that's adorable.
so yeah, if
Like
it's if
really
it's
good.
a good situation, it's a good situation. But if it's like
Mm.
there's also so many horrible stories of people hitting on each other or hitting on someone who doesn't want to be hit on at the gaming
Mm-hmm.
table. And I think, I don't know for sure, but I think there's a pretty good chance that it's an experience that happens to women players a lot more than men
Oh yeah.
players.
Oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
It's
Oh
a
yeah.
social dynamic that we just have in our culture that sucks.
Yeah.
Um,
I have a whole long ass list of like horrible stories from, tabletop RPGs that like, I personally have experienced in relation to like romance and stuff, and yeah, it's not great.
Well, and then there's also on the inverse of that is whenever you're whenever you have a situation like you're not checking in, like
Mhm.
you, even if you do have that check in where it's like, hey, is romance cool in this
Mhm.
game, is everybody cool with like doing that, and then everybody's like, yeah, sure, no problem, whatever, and then you've got two people who are dating, and then suddenly there's a romance subplot, and I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, where it's like there's a
Mhm.
romance subplot, but it's not involving both of those characters that are
Yeah.
played by the two people who are dating, and then suddenly it turns into a jealousy thing.
Mhm.
And I've never actually seen that, But just talking about it, it kind of popped into my mind. It was like, oh man, what if that was a thing? Like,
Yeah, I'm thinking about that now, and I'm like, man, I have no idea how I would handle this.
hmm
Um, if it came up in a group with, me and my partner. Um, whew, yeah,
yeah, because
that's
I'm
that
thinking of it.
sure is something.
Yeah, I'm thinking of it from like a GM perspective, where it's just like all of a sudden you
Mhm.
see that there's just like this level of tension that's building, and
Yeah.
it's like how do you address that? Where it's just like, man, I can see this is going to become a train wreck really fast.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's also the classic two people are dating and then they break up, and then where does the campaign go from there? At the gaming group,
Mhm.
for that matter, it's
Oh
there's no
yeah,
way it's not going to be awkward in some way. So there's so much there's so much ground to be careful with in this. But that said, it also can be a very rich and fun thing to explore with your characters, and it also it's stuff your characters are probably interested in to some degree or another, or
Mhm.
you may define your character as aromantic and not interested in that at all, and um, that's totally fine too. And it's a way your character looks at the world, and something you may understand on a deeper level, how they relate to this element of many people's lives.
yeah. Well,
Mhm.
and that's and like there is a I mean, the more that we've been talking about the subject, the more that I've been like going back and thinking to like old games that I've played and like old characters that I've seen and other people play. And there was actually a character that I thought of, and I feel like I said earlier in the show that it's like, yeah, I don't really remember having anybody that was like a super romantic character. But there was a character that I remember that was played by a friend of mine that he was supposed to just be this just big bruiser character, constantly walking around like heavy armor and nobody can touch. He's a barbarian, or no, he was a paladin. That was it.
Mhm.
And like he was just this big
I was gonna
bruiser,
say a barbarian
yeah,
in
with
heavy
armor,
armor.
yeah.
That's
Um,
kind of weird.
but like he carried around like this giant axe and he was just super hardcore, and then suddenly like one day like some I think it was like some like waif of a woman just like came up and like started talking to him, and then suddenly he became like the biggest baby and was like doing everything he could to like woo this person. And
Mhm.
like I think I actually like asked him after the game. I was like, what was that, like, is that he goes, oh no, it just felt right. Like it just felt right to like make this character like have that softer side. And then
Aw.
now just suddenly be like, yeah, like yeah, he's this big tough guy who kills things and does all this, but then like deep down he's just a romantic. He's just a super sweet guy who's just looking for love.
Hmm.
Hi. What? I don't know if you can hear the tiptoes that are happening right now, but
Yes.
somebody is apparently very annoyed with me, and I'm not sure why.
Oh.
Maybe the best romantic RPG plots may well have some of the best, at least from my personal experience, a correlation to some of the best romantic experiences in that they happen organically.
Yeah,
You don't
exactly.
just like go to a bar to pick up a person to get laid and then have a wonderful romance. That doesn't happen when you force it like that, or at least not for
Mm.
me. It happens when you're going about your life and interacting with people and make a connection that uh,
Yeah.
pursues down that road. And I think that's, I don't know, that's maybe how it might work best in a role playing game.
Yeah,
That's
it's
how
I
mine
think
happened in real life.
yeah,
I've
and I think
I've
that's
Fun
kind
never
of
had.
fact, it actually came at a time when I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna be single for like a year. I'm not gonna date anybody for a while. I just went through like a rough breakup, and then oh shit, I like you. I have to date you. Fuck.
yeah, no, and I think that's kind of a really good spot to just kind of maybe kind of wrap a little bit is
Mhm.
whenever it comes to like
Well,
romance and
hold on.
RPGs, just let it happen naturally.
I do
Yeah.
have a GM tip or warning, or at least is like I know it's good to motivate your player characters by using their connections to the world in interesting ways and sometimes putting them in danger and having bad things happen to them. But please, please, please use your player characters' NPC romantic attachments should be at the bottom of your list for stuff you're gonna mess with to motivate the players.
Yeah, don't do
Yeah.
that.
It's so tropishly bad to kick someone in the girlfriend. Um,
I've
it's
never.
why I couldn't get past the first episode of the Castlevania series on Netflix because the whole point of that
Yeah.
episode is setting up an amazing female character that they kill off in order to motivate the
Mhm.
main character of the story going forward. I've heard it's a great show, but I just could not stand that goddamn trope again.
I
Hmm.
know.
Yeah,
um,
It's
that was kind
very
of
frustrating.
one of the big
and
things.
players, if you think your players hate you when you kill off their mom, their character's mom, not their actual mom in person. I've never done
We
that
have to
before.
make that distinction.
Yeah, if your
GM
players
pro
hate you
tip:
because you
please don't
killed
kill
off
your
their
player's
character,
mom.
yeah, if you think they're going to be pissed off at you for killing off their character's mom, I mean, just if you kill off their character's girlfriend, that's you could reasonably expect there to be a significant possibility of a friendship ending event happening there. So,
Yeah.
just saying, just that's a boundary I wouldn't cross. Or if you do, you might endanger them somewhat.
Hmm.
Suggest there might be a threat or something, but don't go all the way. There's other things you can do to them.
Yeah.
I made that mistake a long time ago with one of my players it was in D&D 3rd edition and his character was outpacing everyone else's game wise. Like the encounters, if I designed an encounter that would challenge his character, it would just wipe the rest of the party because he
Mm.
was just so badass because he figured out how to make the numbers work the right way.
Yeah.
So I killed off his character's NPC or girlfriend in a spectacular way. Oh, it was beautiful. It was a mass mind control sacrifice to the goddess Bishaba that allowed her to enter the world and walk freely as an avatar. And from then on in the campaign, critical failures were a lot more likely. But oh man, yeah,
Oh
the
my
linchpin of
god.
it was I had a succubus possess and destroy his character's girlfriend and use that to get close to him. And he did not talk to me for months,
Hmm.
and I
Wow.
deserved it. But it was also
It
so much
sounds
fun.
really
But don't do it.
cool.
Yeah,
That is incredible from like from like a storytelling standpoint, but like
it was,
I
but
also
it was
see
still
how that
not.
would make somebody very angry at you.
Yeah, it turned like it was basically. I decided as a GM, like his character, like when he started wooing this NPC, like I decided, like basically after almost the first day, like that succubus had been waiting for revenge and just saw that opportunity and offed her and replaced her. Like he barely knew the NPC that he had been dating. It had always been the
Mm,
succubus, but it wasn't worth it. Really, it wasn't. Even though it
yeah.
was such a, I don't know. As a DM, I felt so clever, and I don't know. Still, I still feel kind of good about it because it was a big event that had big stuff going on in the story, and yeah, I couldn't hit his character to do hit point damage just to save my life without killing everyone else off. But
Jeez.
just
Yeah.
don't succumb to the temptation. Don't do what I did.
This is the experience warning at this point, where it's just like
This was
I've done this. Don't do this. Don't do what I've
Yeah.
done.
and this was many years ago, so
Hmm.
more than a decade, I think.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and that
Wow.
is and it's like what you said. I mean that is a super tired trope at this point,
Hmm.
where it's like because I mean that was um I'm not 100% sure if this may be like a problematic opinion, but like I'm a real big fan of like the Deadpool movies. And whenever the second Deadpool movie came out, and then suddenly like the girlfriend character, who to me felt like a really good like she was a I love the actress, and two,
Hmm.
like it felt
Oh
like
yeah.
she was being set up to be like a fairly strong female lead in the second movie, and then
Hmm.
suddenly, spoiler alert for Deadpool 2, by the way, if you're gonna see it, you've probably seen it. If you haven't seen it, you're probably not gonna.
Hmm.
And if you do, if you haven't, you probably don't care. But then the fact of they just straight up offed her, like right there at the very beginning. It was like, come on, guys, really?
Yeah.
And
I
then they
didn't
used her as
bother seeing
emotional.
the movie because of that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
kind of just heard of that. I'm like, nope, nope, not signing up for that.
I
I
mean,
watched the Transporter 2. That was bad enough.
Right.
additional spoiler alert, they do actually bring her back.
Because it's
But
a
like
comic book. And
that is also a trope that I am really fucking annoyed with, and that's why I have a difficult time getting into like superhero stuff anymore because of all the time travel bullshit.
Yeah.
Um out of
yeah,
like all the time travel and the retconning of character deaths and everything.
Nothing truly
And
matters.
yeah,
Like,
I know.
and it makes it cheapens the entire experience.
Yeah, I have a lot of problems with a lot of media uh where character death happens because like they just almost never do it in a meaningful way.
And if they do make it mean something, then like a little while later it gets completely retconned by something else. And it's like, oh, so like I
James,
felt
are we thinking of
feelings.
the same Netflix series right now
There's a distinct possibility. Which one are you
where that
thinking of?
happens? I am 90% sure that we are.
Which one are you talking about though? Let's spoil this series for somebody.
Uh
Actually, I don't think it
oh,
will be. We've been pretty vague about it.
well, it's Stranger Things.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that I'm
Yeah.
gonna watch the next season, honestly, just because I am so unhappy with the trailer that came out for the upcoming season.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
this is news to me.
I have feelings.
Yeah.
I have
Hmm.
feelings about it, and they're not good ones. By the
Yeah.
way, Killer Frog 33, it's my buddy Alex. Thanks for the complimentary words, friendo. It's really nice that you got to tune in this time around.
Yo,
Also, I'm
nice.
jealous that they can play Half Life Alex.
Yeah.
I
I can't
want.
run that
Same.
on my shitty computer.
But yeah, so I mean, I guess we're
Yeah,
almost about
referring
an
to
hour and a half.
romance, I have had that crush since Half Life 2, so.
Yeah, I stopped
Nice.
holding out hope for anything Half Life, and then suddenly this thing comes out, and it's like, God damn it, guys, don't do
Mm.
this to me. But anyway, so we're creeping up on the 90-minute mark, so I guess we can
Mm.
kind of wrap there. Final thoughts. I know that. Well, actually, you know what, Cliff? Let's start with you. What are kind of some of your final thoughts on the topic tonight, or in general? Just whatever you want to say. It's cool.
Yeah, I guess just the idea of romance at the table really just highlights the issues of safety and consent, which are fairly recent innovations in tabletop role playing games, at least in a more mainstream sense. And I highly encourage people to embrace those. I think there's a fear from some people that using these safety tools reduces creativity. It is actually the opposite,
Hmm.
um, because knowing your limits helps you feel more free to more freely express yourself without having to worry about holding back about this or that boundary. Though that said, it's still important to be perceptive and sensitive of people's boundaries, even if they haven't already been explicitly stated. So yeah, that's it. Just take good care of each other, be nice to each other, try to be sensitive, and when those boundaries are crossed, do your best to not get defensive and
Hmm.
listen. It's so easy to get defensive and see someone's negative reaction as something to do as a judgment on yourself when it's so much more important to consider their feelings. But
Hmm.
it's at least for those of us who have a I don't know, I don't get to get at the gender side of things, but I think from my more male sided experience of things, we're a lot more likely to jump to that getting defensive and saying no, that's not what I was trying to do, when you're much better off taking a moment to listen more and say, oh, I'm sorry, that's I'm sorry you have that experience, and not try to relate it to a judgment upon yourself.
Yeah,
uh,
that's
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 a lesson
been
that was really hard for me to learn.
Yeah, that's been a real struggle for me as well. Is to not get defensive when somebody's like, "Hey, that hurts me, that bothers me," and like crossing that boundary. And it's, I mean,
Mhm.
I think I've said this quote pretty much every episode of this show. Is there's a terribly awful man who made a very good quote that it said, just because whenever you hurt someone's feelings, it's not your job to say that you didn't.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, no, that's really good. If I like that it's like, yeah, just don't get defensive about it.
Yeah. That also brings me into my final thoughts. Which again, I'm kind of, coming back to the thing that I say every episode. It's basically my fucking catchphrase at this point. Games are supposed to be fun.
Hmm.
If you set boundaries with your players, you know what it is that they won't enjoy and what it is that they will enjoy. And you can work within that constraint to make sure that every session that you have with your players is a session where they will have fun and they will enjoy themselves, and you know they will be able to enjoy this game as much as possible, because you put that safety tool in place. And again, boundaries are always important to have in mind, especially with issues of like romance and sex, um because as we've already said, uh that kind of subject matter can cross boundaries really fucking fast.
Hmm.
um and it's very, very important to be cognizant of that, um in a game, whether you are the GM or whether you are a player.
Yeah. And I guess my final thoughts just kind of come back to what I said before. I mean, just because you check in at the beginning doesn't necessarily mean that additional check-ins later are not necessary and
Mhm.
and they're not bad. I mean, if it comes down to, like, I've had really cool ideas to me for a game, for something that I wanted to do in a game, and
Mhm.
I brought it up to the player. Hey, just so you guys know, like, I'm not trying to give away any like story or stuff or anything like that, but like this is kind of the direction I'm wanting to take. Is everybody cool with that? And
Mhm.
I felt that it's enriched the experience tenfold, because
Yeah,
one, it allows
absolutely.
everybody to know what they're getting themselves into, and it makes it to where, like, I've got really great players in general, and like my table's really great about, oh, this is where you're wanting to take the story. All right, cool. We will help facilitate that. Um, but also it's allowed for those situations where we don't have another null situation, that it's
Mhm.
just all of a sudden, somebody hits a point where we've got to just pull the brakes and just full stop a game. Um, but yeah, like, just check in. And I mean, one thing that I try to do is just check in every couple of sessions. Be like, hey, is everybody enjoying this? Is it cool? And I usually do it privately. Just kind of talk to each person individually. That way, they're not at the table in front of everybody, and you kind of have that kind of I don't want to say performance anxiety, but it's like you don't want to be the stick in the mud who's just like, no, I really don't like this aspect of it, and then everybody kind
Mhm.
of looks at you, just like, what the fuck, bro? Everybody else enjoying it. Can't you like suck it up? Um, or maybe that's just my own anxiety talking. The world may never know. Um, but uh,
Mhm.
but yeah. So with that, Cliffo, I want to thank you for coming on tonight. We really do appreciate it.
Mhm.
So why don't you tell people what you do, where they can find you?
All right, so I guess the Shadowcasters Network website is a great place to go for most of the things I do things about or with. So that's just shadowcasters.network. That's the web address. There's no .com or whatever. The .network is the thing after the dot. So just shadowcasters.network. There's our Arcology podcast site on there, as well as Legends of Earthdawn, and the sites of some of my other fellow Shadowcasters Network founders. So um, check that out. There's lots of cool Shadowrun and adjacent content there. the Shadowcasters Network Twitch. We're kind of dormant at the moment because Oz is the lead for that, and he's busy and stressed out, so he's not able to handle focusing on that at this time. His work has been nuts, and so we're having, I'm sure, some more content showing up there, but not as busy now as it will be in some time shortly after, or has been. Other than that, keeping out for some cool RPG stuff coming out. Kickstarter at some point later this year for an RPG named Purgatory that I got to write a bunch for, and I'm very
Yes.
excited about.
Oh my
Um,
god, I'm so excited for that.
I don't know when it's going to launch, but and then my friend Opti and his company Fracking Unicorns has Gangs of the Undercity is going to be kickstarting this summer as well. So looking forward to that skirmish-based miniatures game, Cyberpunk Gangers.
I
So
hear it looks really cool.
it
Not that
does
I
It
look
does.
know,
super cool,
not that I
and I've
know
gotten
what
the
the box
chance to
art looks like.
playtest it at several different stages, and it's been fun every time, and I've seen big improvements every time, and it's going to be such a great game.
Mhm.
And I'm super looking forward to that. So,
I'm also very excited about the audio drama that is coming out as a promo for that.
yep, Worlds Without End.
Mm.
There's so many cool things to follow that I'm uh, involved with, or it's somehow tangentially related to, that I want people to check out. So, yeah,
Mhm.
just have fun and check out all this different content that's being put out, and support creators doing fun and neat things. Um, whether that's me or somebody else. I do have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/our ecology podcast. And we've got some exclusive content we release to patrons. At certain levels, you can hang out with us in the chat and listen as we record our game sessions for the arcology actual play, which you'll be able to hear what's happening probably more than a year in advance of the actual release times. Um, I could probably think of other things and go on, but I'll just stop there.
Mhm.
Hey, you're also a musician. Like
Oh, I should mention I do music
kick
stuff.
that.
So yeah, soundcloud.com/, Prism Shard. There's a hyphen in there, PRISM dash SHARD. I've got a bunch of music there. A lot of it's designed to be played as background music for role playing game scenes, or actual, whether they're actual plays or home games, or I don't know, an audio drama or something. They're designed to um to provide a certain mood and not draw too much attention to the sound. And there's
Mhm.
also some other just songs that are out there that are just kind of more balls at the wall craziness, like Citizen Hypocrite is a good one if you're a fan of cyberpunk and neo anarchists and stuff. I did that one with
It's a
Opti.
very good
It
one.
was a good time.
Mm. A lot of your music has shown up in my podcast, Pink Mohawk Edition.
Yeah, it's always
So
fun to hear that. Actually, there was one time I was listening and I was hearing a song in the background for a while before I even realized it was one of my own.
yeah.
That was a bit surreal. Like, that's a cool song. Sounds familiar. And wait,
Mhm.
Oh, that's why it sounds
that's my
It's
familiar.
you.
song. I did that.
Which
Yeah.
speaking of which, now that I've got you in front of the internet, I actually need a song, an intro song for the Nerdcast, so I might have to come to you for that
Ah.
Awesome.
because
Well, the
my
stuff that's posted on my SoundCloud is posted under a Creative Commons license, so anybody can use it without having to ask permission. You just have to,
credit.
post somewhere where you got it from.
Mhm.
But yeah, making custom music is fun too. I'm working on something right now that's super close to the deadline for Chicago Shadows, the video project.
Oh, nice.
Um, and
I'm very excited about that as well.
yeah, me too. I got hired to write some music for the Worlds Without End podcast, so got paid a little bit for that.
Yeah.
That was fun. Um,
Mhm.
I always like to get paid to make music too. That's extra
Oh
fun.
yeah, getting paid is always great.
Putting things out for free is cool, but getting
Mm.
getting paid to do something is neat too.
Yes. I
That's
love being paid to do things. I like uh being able to live and pay for food and rent. and stuff.
It's like the new Patreon commercial says, "I'll just eat my likes for breakfast. You don't have to pay me."
Yeah.
Yeah, no. But yeah, that's a good point that I think we should probably throw out there to the internets. Pay artists for their art because they deserve it, and it's exceptionally
Please.
hard to create.
Mm.
But thank you everyone for hanging out. We really appreciate everybody who comes by and chats with us. As far as what is coming up on Riot House, tomorrow is game night with Big Mac. I'm pretty sure, unless all of the real world fuckery has caused him to not be able to again. In which case,
Mm.
it will probably be me doing stuff. Thursday is game night with me, where we'll continue the saga of the W and Chaz, because nothing's better than trash people in Sims. And then next Monday is Come As You Are with somebody. We may have a guest. We might not. It might just be, me just talking to myself. Who knows? We'll figure it out. We're Riot House. We don't have any rules. But on that note, thanks again, everybody, for hanging out. We love you. You are important. And yeah, have a great night and great week. Bye, guys.
Bye.
I need to actually hit the stream ending button. There.